Thought we'd just start by having a look back at the game on the weekend. I guess it was another close loss for you on the road, where again you were in it until the final few minutes. So having had a chance to review it a bit more closely, is there anything you can take from it, and especially the finish there?
Well, I mean, the finish is one part. We look at the whole game. The positive, the glass half full, is that we're in it right to the end against another top team in the competition on their home deck. After some challenges in the lead-in, and I think that's a real positive out of it. We're able to overcome those and a number of times and get out of the blocks really well, but also then come back at Port Adelaide and go back at them and hit the front in the last quarter. So with 5 minutes to go was a real positive, and our blokes had great energy. Now we just made some basic fundamental mistakes in that last couple of minutes. A bit about skills, but just a couple of fumbles. Just being clean around the ball. So we'd like to be able to tidy that up. And so it's always a balancing act. It's about trying to improve those moments and being better in those moments and with the positive of being in it against a really quality team. But we would have loved to have after hitting the front with 5 minutes to go, be able to keep our noses in front.
And it's not the first time it's happened. I guess it kind of reminded me a bit of the Fremantle game, again on the road. Managed to fight your way back in front, and then the opposition got the last couple of goals. So is that just about composure and training for that, as well as trying to avoid those fumbling mistakes that you mentioned?
Yeah, I think it is, and just being really able to think through those situations and finish the game off. I mean, we've come from various parts, whether it's behind and in the hunt. Once again, the positive being that we're right into the game until the last couple of minutes, and but we still need to find a way to finish off those close ones, and we've got to make sure that when we get ourselves into those spots to be able to capitalise and keep our foot down and score another goal to keep the momentum and the pressure on the opposition.
All right, so has the team exceeded your expectations with how well they've been able to match up against quality opposition like Port Adelaide this year?
Look, we've been confident in our ability to do that, to be able to play against some quality opposition. We were confident in the off-season, and we've been quite confident all year that we can really match some good opposition. And we've been able to get over the line in a few of those games, get over the line really well, and we've come up just short in a couple of them. The ability to be competitive against a lot of those top 8, top 10 teams has been a real positive to come out of the year, and we're still to take that next step. And that's probably where we are as a team, is to be able to take that next step, to be able to capitalise on giving ourselves an absolute opportunity to match it with some of the best teams in the comp.
John, obviously you've clocked up a few days on the road now with this COVID situation. How's the group handling that, and is there support to obviously stay perhaps beyond next week if required?
Yeah, look, we felt our group I'm talking about players and staff, handled it really well last year in a challenging environment on the hub. Last year we didn't know where we were going to go or how long we were going to be away from and we felt like we handled it really well. And we've taken that same mentality into this year as well. It's a little bit different. We only got sort of 3 hours notice last week to pack everything up and get the squad to Melbourne. So things went pretty quickly. And some of the isolation stuff was a bit different last week, but I think our group's pretty resilient, able to roll with the punches a bit and just take it as it comes. And that's what we were able to do last week. It was I think we had 4 or 5 COVID tests last week, and sitting there in cricket nets and early flights and being in isolation for the week. And in the end, you just get on with it. I mean, you make the most of those opportunities. We're fortunate. The community's going through some pretty tough times. Not only back home in Sydney, there's all over the country. So we still feel pretty fortunate that we're able to do what we can do.
Are there any players, John, perhaps with young families or that just had babies or anything like that, might have to go home in the next 10 days or so?
We haven't, not at the moment, not that we know of. But I mean, you've got to understand too that we don't project out to that. You really take it one day at a time down here. When you're in these sort of situations, you try and live in the moment. You don't project too far out. I think as soon as you start projecting too far out, you start talking about all the what ifs and which way it goes, and things change so quickly that you've really got to live in the moment. And we feel like we've got our players supported really well here. We feel like we're doing whatever we can for the families that are back in Sydney to be able to support them as much as we can. And we also know that every individual player is different, and so we also understand that. So every individual player's got a different story. So we try and get that balance right as well. But all in all, we felt like we handled it really well last year. We've got an experienced playing group as far as the leadership group, and we'll work through whatever's required and take each step as it comes.
John, judging by your answer there, I probably know what your answer is going to be here, but the AFLPA is keen for the guys to get back after round 17. Do you share that wish? I know it's looking ahead and you said you don't want to do that too much, but is that the ideal scenario?
Well, I think that's an obvious answer, isn't it? Like, I think in an ideal world, we'd like to be back. I think that's a given for everybody that's in this environment, not just our players, any player across the competition. If you'd like to be able to do that. But once again, we'll work with what's presented to us. It's not something that we know too much about just sitting here right now. It's I just get back to the last statement, is that as soon as you start projecting too far ahead and stop living in the moment, you don't enjoy the moment. You've got to try and enjoy every moment. And we're enjoying each other's company. We're still learning. We're still going through the footage from last week. We'll look at West Coast this week. And we'll also make sure that, importantly, we give our players some downtime and we'll support the families back home. So that's all you can do, is take that day by day.
Just on West Coast, are you any more weary than normal, given they've come off a pretty big loss on the weekend?
I'm always respecting West Coast. I mean, you look at their lineup. Their lineup's very experienced, quality players all over the place. Some of their players that came back in from injury last week got another game under their belt. So all those things come into it, and obviously they're rebounding. So so are we, and so in the end we'll take that as it comes as well.
John, from the outside, probably a bit of a few question marks over time about Lance's durability and his ability to get back on the park, given the number of setbacks he's had. But to see the type of things he was doing, particularly against Port Adelaide, like a rundown tackle, as well as the stuff that as well as his goal kicking. I mean, how much more of that do you think we can get from him now that he's got back in the groove a bit more?
Well, I think everyone understands that 34 is not going to be doing what he did at 24. I think everyone understands that and accepts that. And so that's important to note as well. And but if he's able to play a role and contribute to our team like he did on the weekend and give us a chance to win, that's fantastic. His ability to be able to keep training consistently, and I've just kept on saying it, is that the training is an important part of his program. He's getting out there doing more of it, and therefore he's able to feel a bit better on match day and move around a bit better. So it all sort of feeds into each other. We hope that he continues to keep along the path that he's been set the last few weeks, because he's been moving pretty well on the ground. He's been doing a lot of the training. He's doing a lot of the strength work. So we're hoping that it continues.
John, you as you mentioned, you did a pretty good job at the hub last year. I was just wondering what stands out in terms of, I suppose, processes or focuses that kind of worked well then that you've already started to do now. Is it sort of, apart from staying in the moment, are there any things that stand out?
Probably not to have too many meetings. That's one thing that we learnt last year, is that just because you've got all the players around a fair bit of the time, it doesn't mean you need to sit down and talk to them about footy all day, every day. And I think, that was one of the things we did last year, was to keep it pretty, we get into the business part of it when we need to, and we drill into it, and we've got to make sure we get a lot of things right, and we've got to keep improving, no question about that. And we'll keep doing that, but it's also important to let them go and switch off from football and freshen up. I think last week, it was probably on Saturday, it was probably an 18-hour day for our players by the time we got back and got tested for the second time in 24 hours on Saturday night. So that's a significant part of the day that they've been through. So we give them a couple of days off to freshen up mentally, and then go and do their own thing, recharge their batteries, and then get back into it. And that's what we'll do.
And in terms of that sort of staying in the moment side of things, is it purely for players, or even as a coach, do you try to steer clear of talking to Charlie and Tom about best case scenarios, worst case scenarios, and what might be on the cards?
Yeah, fortunate that Charlie and Tom have got plenty on their plate, so they take a lot of that load. There has to be some planning discussions because you need to be aware of planning where we're training, for instance, and gym sessions, and just a lot of that stuff that goes on in the background. It's important for us all to try and switch off. The reality is a lot of people in the football departments now are working hours that are absolutely through the roof, and we understand why, but there's a lot of people doing a lot of work to get to make sure that the program still continues, and it's not just coaches, it's right throughout the football department.
John, how impressive you've been with the rise of Will Haywood. He couldn't really find a way in earlier in the season, but he's become one of the main weapons up front now.
Yeah, he's been good for us. He started off a bit quietly, but really it was probably just for about a 3 or 4 week patch at the start of the year. Then once he came back in again, he's been terrific. He's very disciplined, and he's kept on going. So that's the important part, is that he was disciplined again on the weekend, and hopefully that continues as well.
Got a bit of a different one on Buddy. He's been fined for making front-on contacts with, I think it was Jared Leonard against Port Adelaide. And he was involved in a similar incident against Carlton and Nick Newman a few weeks ago. Have you had a word to him about his tackling technique and making sure he doesn't put himself at risk of more scrutiny from the MRO? Because I'm sure you prefer the high-performance team to decide when he misses a game rather than a silly suspension.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's also about just free kicks. Don't give the free kicks away. And we get the ball in our front half, we don't want to give an easy exit. So it's as much about that as anything. It's a fine balance because we love the way he attacks the contest. And so there's split-second decisions that these guys have got to make. Even with the most experienced players, they don't always get it right. And particularly the blokes that are big, and he's 198, 199 centimetres, and sometimes he doesn't get it right.
Is it a bit trickier too for the guys that have been around for a while, played under a very different game, or perhaps grew up playing a very different game, and it's changing quite quickly, isn't it? Over the past,
yeah, it is. But I think, if you hit someone high in a free kick situation, that's probably been around for a long time as well. So you give away a free kick, and we let the pressure off. But once again, he attacks the ball hard. It's a very fine balance to make that decision in a split second when you're that size.
John, just looking at around selection, Logan McDonald didn't play in the VFL at the weekend. Was that around just managing his body, being a young guy, or?
No, we had a process to try and look at Logan for a couple of weeks. We thought it would be only 2 weeks. We wanted to put him on a specific program for a couple of weeks. We've been, the development of a player is not just about playing senior football. Sometimes it's about going back, playing reserves, but it's also about some training that we wanted to get around him, and work on some real specifics part of his game, which he's aware of, and our development coaches are working on with him. So it was more about locking in for a couple of weeks in those parts of his game before he goes again. And so that's what the original plan was when we had a 4-hour window to come to Melbourne. And so how long that goes for now, we're not quite sure. Obviously, with that development part of the game is a bit of a challenge with young players, and how we can try and keep managing their development, obviously, with what's been going on.
Are you able to give us a bit of an insight into some of those things you're working on with him?
Oh, just strength. It's just key forward. He's just getting bigger and stronger and being able to use his body. So it's not there's nothing too secretive behind it. It's a bit about just as a young key forward. He's an 18-year-old. There's not many come in as first-year key forwards and do as well as what he's done. He's been fantastic for us. We've been really pleased with what he's done in his first year. He's exceeded our expectations by a fair bit. So he's a great kid. He works really hard. He's overshot where we thought he'd be, which is wonderful for him and us. And it also gives him a chance for the next couple of weeks to work on some specifics, of, not only for this year, but going on into the future.
Is he down in Melbourne now?
No, he's not.
How many did you bring down?
No, he's not here at the moment. We brought down just over 30. We had planned to be away for a week, 2 weeks at the most. That's what we'd like to have done when we had the 3 hours notice. He's still back in New South Wales, so we're just working through what to be able to do with that. With a few of those boys there, we'd like to be able to get down as well.
Do you think having someone like Logan exceeding expectations, as you said, in their first year, do you think it adds a layer of unpredictability to the side that you can get them in playing senior footy early and doing well?
Oh, no question. We've been really fortunate that not Logan, Errol, Braden Campbell, Chad Warner, these guys have been fantastic for us. Added not only depth, but a different style of footy to our team. And we're really pleased with that as well.
One more question, guys, or are you all good?
I'll chuck one in if no one else has got it. Can we just get a bit of an update on some of the injured boys? Any progress there, like a Chad Warner or Sam Reid, these sorts of guys, as far as how far away they are?
Sam Reid's back training, so we'd like to give him a couple of weeks of training at the moment. So he's coming along quite well, but he's still probably a week or two away from getting right into it. I mean, we'd like to give him a couple of weeks training, giving his history. Lewis Melican's probably a bit the same. So he's probably a week behind Sam in that aspect. Chad Warner's feeling really good, so we'll build him up slowly over the next week. Just introduce him back into the running, make sure his leg's feeling good, and hopefully he continues and he gets back in pretty quickly. That's what we're hoping. So we'll just see how he goes over this week. Just take it easy. If he feels pretty good about himself, we'll ramp it up a bit quicker next week.